region. Peter, I'll leave it to you to introduce your esteemed panel.
Thank you very much, Anson. Interesting, in the last couple of years that I have been here, particularly in China, 2 to 3 phone calls a week on this very hot topic from multinationals wanting to discuss far versus near sourcing. Interesting because developing a far versus near sourcing strategy, particularly with Asia, China as one of your sourcing destinations, isn't new. Multinationals now have been doing it for decades. So what's driving the interest? What's driving the change? As mentioned by a number of our speakers already today, there are some recent emerging trends, particularly in China, with rapid rises in labour energy costs. Obviously, the strengthening of the RMB. At the same time, we've got emerging alternatives within Asia. However, they still have some challenges. Access to skilled labour, access to raw materials, access to good infrastructure, and therefore being able to be responsive. So it's not that straightforward, not that simple. So it's a great topic, and let me introduce each of our esteemed speakers who have quite a lot of experience within Asia, but also globally from a sourcing perspective. First, I'd like to introduce Amit Chakraborty, Senior VP, General Manager right now with Hasbro Far East, a career that started back in 1990 with the Tata Group in India, where he had roles such as Production Management Division, Production Engineer, then moved to Philips Lighting, where he had roles in supply chain logistics, sourcing, moved to Indonesia in 1999 under a sourcing role, then Singapore, 2004 he was in Hong Kong, again head of AP supply chain and sourcing for Philips Lighting. Became VP and General Manager for sourcing in Shanghai, so again another move through the region, and in 2010 returned to Hong Kong where he's taken his current role and has responsibilities such as downstream design, engineering and product development, supply chain and sourcing. Please welcome Amit to the stage. Our next esteemed panellist I'd like to invite up is Veit Gus, VP of Sourcing for the VF Corporation, responsible for sourcing for a number of divisions and brands. And as most of us know, over 50 brands within the organisation. He's currently supporting brands such as Lee, Rock & Republic, Wrangler, Workwear, Nautica, as well as a range of licensed brands as well. Interestingly, started his career as a buyer for a German mail order company, Otto. Moved into a sourcing role in New Delhi, India in 1989. Then to Hong Kong with another organisation, Eddie Bauer, to head up their Asia sourcing. Then to Miami to set up the America sourcing. Then back to Germany. And now in his current role with VF here in Hong Kong. So welcome. Another panellist with a lot of experience in the sourcing game is Frank Marino, who's currently the General Manager at Kingfisher Sourcing Organisation in Hong Kong, where he's been there for, recently after 4 years of doing a similar role in Shanghai. And as we know, Kingfisher has a lot of leading brands, particularly in the home improvement area, where it's ranked number 3, I think, in the world. And some of the key retail brands that a number of us would be familiar with, such as B&Q, Castorama, Screwfix, etc. Frank has more than 17 years of retail and sourcing experience as part of the international Kingfisher business. He's held roles in store operations, buying and executive commercial roles, GM roles and sourcing. And in his current role here in Hong Kong, he's in charge of the local sourcing across China, India and Southeast Asia. Welcome, Frank. And our fourth member of the panel is Richard Thomas, who's the head of Far East for Marks & Spencer Asia Pacific, where he began his career in '92, over 10 years with the group in London and Hong Kong, product development and technology roles, sourcing and supply chain roles. Then the next 10 years has held a lot of executive roles throughout Asia. 2 years at Monsoon Accessorizing as head of sourcing, 3 years as the MD of Mosaic Fashions, 2 years CEO in Asia at All Saints Retail, and then rejoined Marks & Spencer in 2011, where he's head of region, responsible for sourcing strategy and operations in the Far East, and is actively undertaking the opening of 15 different buying and sourcing offices. And welcome, Richard, to our panel. near and far sourcing, thought I might lead off with an interesting question. Near versus far sourcing has different meanings to different organisations. And I thought it'd be interesting to understand from your perspective, what does it mean to your organisation? Amit, if you don't mind starting with yourself.
Yeah, sure. If you allow me to take a step back here, and I was jotting a few points as people were talking. And, the first question that came to my mind is, why did we come to China in the first place? I think the major reason why we came to China was low cost, essentially low labor cost and low infrastructure cost. Large part of the low infrastructure cost and therefore the low infrastructure, many of us didn't feel it 15, 20 years back when we came, because there was a bridge of Hong Kong entrepreneurs and Hong Kong office. So we didn't feel that. And the cost differential between China and in those days Europe, US, Japan was in the order of 4 to 5 times, and the magnitude was very high. Yet when we came to China 15 years back, all the discussions that we see today about moving to other locations, about bad infrastructure, the total cost of organization will be higher, all these discussions were there. And we used to call it a tango inertia. You are in a tango, whether it's in Europe or US, and you don't want to break that inertia, though there are opportunities outside. I see that same tango inertia for China discussions today. So I want to set my scene by stating that. However, China has moved up the value chain. It's no more a low-cost manufacturer in many cases. The infrastructure is now world-class. It's got developed development services, R&D, etc. Though it might not be world-class, it's definitely worth noting that China submits as many or even more number of patents as US today. However, cost has become a critical point of discussion today, which is why we are all here, and that has been the tipping point for discussion whether we go out of China or not. We see it more as an opportunity than as a risk or a threat. So to toys specifically, I'm from Hasbro, and if you have played with Monopoly, Transformers, etc., you know the company I come from. I think many of you have grown up with these toys. Toys seem a bit simple, but toys can be very simple, plush toys, to very complex mechatronic toys. So we go through a range of simple toys to very complex set of toys, which might require both design as well as sourcing. So therefore, we take differentiated approach to setting up sourcing footprints, and we take this opportunity today, or this time in the world, to set up these sourcing footprints. We did a lot of studies in the last years, and our big sourcing footprints are that for global supplies, China will remain an important global supplier. But essentially, where design and source and manufacturing becomes a deciding point, India will be a big center for us, if possible, if we can find solutions. For low-cost global sourcing, Bangladesh would be a good center for us. We also look into regional sourcing models where if it's automated and bulky, we could look at Bulgaria and Turkey for Europe, Mexico for US. And at the same time, for local-to-local sourcing, we take advantage of tax regimes, etc. So there will not be a one-to-one replacement ever for China, but we start looking at it in this way.
Thanks, Sam. Fine. What about VF Corporation?
Yeah, let me explain a little bit more about VF. So, we have about 50 brands, brands like the North Face, Timberland, Lee Wrangler, Nautica, Vans, so equipment brands like Jansport, Eastpak. It's a wide variety of brands and products and needs and markets. So there's no silver bullet, as you can imagine, that you can just come up with one magic wand, you swing it and it happens, right? And it solves your problem. So maybe I can focus on my largest business, which is the jeanswear business, Lee and Wrangler. So when you look at that, it's centered in the US. And the first decision anybody makes when you talk about jeans product in VF is, do we do it internal in our own factories, or do we go outside? Now, we do have about 30 factories in Mexico, Nicaragua, and Honduras, producing about 100 million pairs of jeans a year, and I do about 53 million pairs here out in Asia. So 2/3 of our volume actually comes from Mexico. I think it's interesting to look at it when you discuss near versus far, to look at that mechanic. Why are we in Mexico? Well, we migrated from the US at the time, when from Kentucky manufacturing belt, the southern states, into Mexico. And we decided, unlike Levi's, to not sell off the factories, but to keep them as a strategic weapon and to engineer them to the point that they are competitive and remain competitive. Today, I cannot beat a Mexican price on a 5-pocket jean, even out of Bangladesh. I just can't. Why? Because these guys make it 3 times faster than anyone out here in Asia. Now, what does that do? You can do this with your product, but you need to have the right product. So they have the luxury of picking product first. They have the first pick. So anything they don't like, they send to Asia, right? Anything they like, which is easy to do, it's the 5-pocket construction, it's their standard, their basic. They run through Mexico and they run it. I mean, they have engineered the daylight out of this thing, and they can really do it in a very, very fast way. So this is one way you can use near production. The downside is you do it on basics, where usually you have the longest forecasting ability. So you don't really need that kind of speed when you do it for speed. You do it for price, means you need to engineer a lot and you invest in your engineering. So there is an opportunity for people to go into fashion and go for products that need speed to a near sourcing model, but we all know it's going to be more expensive. And the difficulty that I've seen in discussions with buyers who approach us for speed is they are not really able to put a dollar value behind speed. And Christoph has mentioned that you need to understand what is your whole supply chain. What's your, not only supply chain, what's your whole product life cycle? What's the effect of speed on this life cycle? Inventory savings, late decisions, making right decisions. So what's that element? And it's very difficult to discuss and to identify that value of this element. And unless you know this, because you know that it's going to be more expensive to produce near, unless you know that value, you can't actually make the evaluation whether near versus far is more profitable or not. And that's the key. You need to find out your product life cycle cost in your near versus far sourcing model. So once you come to Asia, I sign up for everything that Christoph has said. Right on. Okay.
Thanks, Brian. Frank? Kingfisher.
Yes, so as you say, Peter, first, Kingfisher is not about the beer or the airline. That's clearly about the leading home improvement and DIY retailer in Europe, number 3 in the world. As we trade with famous retail brands as B&Q and Screwfix in the UK, Castorama, Brico Dépôt in France. It's still very, very European-based, but we've got a more and more international organization. Home improvement, as you can imagine, and that's important for the rest of the conversation about near or far sourcing. It's about a very broad range of products that we sell in our shops, in our stores. Because from the floor to the roof, we trade and we sell a huge amount of building materials, of kitchen and bathroom, of decorative items, electrical and plumbing. So really, really quite complex business and very different realities for each of these categories in terms of sourcing as well. So likewise, the Kingfisher sourcing organization is quite sizable today and rather international as well. We manage 40,000 products from 1,000 factories coming from about 35 countries. And we have about 9 sourcing offices worldwide now to manage these operations. Yeah. So what I'd like to share, just to illustrate this near-far sourcing, is about the history, the evolution of our sourcing organization. Because roughly it all started here in 1994, where we opened our first sourcing office. We then opened sourcing operation in the mainland, in Shanghai, where I was for the last 4 years, but as well in Shenzhen. Quite successful. But interestingly, we sourced already from India since 2003. And we were finding their products like home textile, like some brassware products that we couldn't find in China or wouldn't be so competitive. We opened as well an office in Poland, in Warsaw in 2004 already. So it's not brand new. And that was, again, more than, I would say, to find alternatives to China. It was more to get access to product ranges that either would not be manufactured in China for raw material reasons or could not be moved to Europe for logistic reasons. Yeah? So we talk about pine shelving and decking, we talk about shelving and storage, we talk a lot about building materials, which are very, very bulky products. So What is true now is since 2010, we have clearly accelerated the globalization of organization. Okay? We've opened an office in 2010 in Vietnam, again, based initially on garden furniture, but we find a lot of more products there. And then last year, we just opened a new office in Istanbul, in Turkey. And that's again, offering both ways. First, access to new kind of products that we could not find in China. But more and more, we're going to use this near sourcing platform that we have created with both Turkey and Warsaw as an ability to benchmark and to quote and to compare our prices worldwide. Yeah. The challenge, as it was raised several times, is to be able to really compare the end-to-end cost and to make sure that we are able to take the right decision, because you're going to compare an FOB price with potentially a DDP price, or FOB from a different destination. We need to take the stock holding into account. We need to take the speed to market and the inventory stock. So it's getting far more complex, and that's what we're working on at the moment. But definitely, the near sourcing strategy, the near sourcing platform is for us very, very important. We do source about 80% in China today, 20% near. We see that rebalancing, as Christophe also said as well, reshifting a bit from 80-20 to maybe 70-30 or 60-40. But it's about balance, it's about completing ranges, and we will see a major shift.
So Richard, 2 careers at Marks and Spencer.
Indeed.
How have you seen near versus far sourcing strategies evolve in that organisation?
Well, it's interesting, referencing Christophe again. I don't think it's very difficult to separate fully a sourcing strategy from a retail strategy. As you say, a 10-year gap coming back to Marks and Spencer again, it's quite interesting to compare and contrast. Around the time I left, we were manufacturing 80% of our goods in the UK. We also took the decision to close our international business and just focus on the UK. So we closed in France and Spain, Western Europe. We almost sold Hong Kong. Thankfully, we hung on to that. Otherwise, opening in China would have been a lot more difficult. And we decided to be very insular in our approach. Now, coming back into M&S 10 years later, we now retail. We have bricks and mortar in 43 different countries. We service 80 countries in terms of retailing. And our vision at the moment is to be a global, international, multi-channel retailer. So a very different business to the business I left 10 years ago. It's become very complex in terms of supply. Obviously, with all of those stores and all of those different territories, we source from 50 different countries. The big players being China, India, and Turkey. So we've seen massive growth there. And we've also seen significant growth in, I was going to say emerging markets, but I think they're pretty much emerged, places like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Bangladesh. And what's interesting, I think, is we talked a lot earlier on about efficiencies and about labour rates. I personally believe that China can compete just in terms of the FOB price, even if you just take price on its own, alongside Indonesia and Vietnam. But where Cambodia and Bangladesh have come into their own, really, certainly in terms of the UK and Europe, is a duty-free access. So yes, you could make up for having higher labour costs and efficiencies, but it's very hard to swallow the 12%. So we source significantly from Cambodia and Bangladesh. But we do want to kind of put a cap on those countries too, because, by definition, the fact they're duty-free means they're very poor countries with a number of issues and risks associated with them. My personal view is that you probably shouldn't source more than around 25% of your goods globally from places like that. And we are seeing other opportunities in new emerging markets too. But the key thing for Marks and Spencer at the moment, I think, is almost to take stock of all of the change that we've seen in the last 10 years. 80% in the UK down to a couple of percent. All of this change, all of these new factories, lots of new countries. And perhaps we should stop migrating. I keep getting asked about which is the new frontier. Is it Myanmar? Is it Ethiopia? Is it Timbuktu? Someone's got a great factory down there. And I think really the time now is to almost stop migrating, make work what we've already got and make it work better. Every time we open a new factory, a new location, probably $3, $4, $5 million. Many of our manufacturers are 100% M&S manufacturers, so ultimately that cost comes back to us again. So, we're de-risking Cambodia to go into Bangladesh, and then de-risking Bangladesh by going into Cambodia, and taking stock and looking what we've got at the moment. The final point I'll make is that China, I think, probably similar to Christophe, China is decreasing slightly, but the cake is growing. So China's still important for us. I think in sort of 10, 15 years' time, whether we'll be manufacturing as many goods in China or not, probably not. However, raw materials and fabric, trims, components, yarn, all of these things, I think are very important. And when I go back to sort of 10 years ago, being part of a very much a UK-centric business, China was our major source of fabric. I think in 10 years' time it will still be our major source of fabric. So wherever we migrate, wherever we manufacture, I think China has a massive role to play.
Thanks, Richard. Looking at each of your backgrounds, I mean, there's more than 25 plus years of sourcing experience across multiple locations, and a lot of that background's had to do with opening up different buying offices. With the benefits of hindsight, what you've learned over the more than 2 decades of sourcing, if you had the opportunity to start up a sourcing procurement operation for your global enterprise, how might you structure that from scratch with some of the lessons you've learned? Any sort of insights from your experience?
Yeah, I think looking at it from a 60,000 or 30,000 feet perspective, you probably have 2 different models you can pursue. The one is a centralized approach where you have one hub or one head office, and then you have satellite offices feeding into that. And the other one is a decentralized approach where everybody goes to every country and every country works rather independently. So I've worked in both systems, with both systems, and I think it's, with hindsight, I would set it up today as a centralized approach. It may come across initially a little bit more expensive, but I think you do get more strategy in there. You have a more driving force out of the hub in the region, rather than having merchandisers or buyers from your brands in various parts of the world drive their own strategy or their own execution strategy, mostly put it on, hey, that's a nice guy, or I know this guy since 25 years. So it's much more a strategic approach when you centralize it. There's lots of debate around this, but I think with hindsight I would go for a centralized setup.
Yeah, it's a kind of halfway, because we have hubs, and we have hubs here in Hong Kong, Shanghai, now the near sourcing platform, and that are very important to keep and to crystallize the expertise. It takes a lot of time to build the expertise of the teams and the understanding of the business and of the sourcing operations, especially around quality, product development, etc. So we need these hubs, and they are very important to keep the expertise and the experience of the company. Then we work with smaller satellites, which could then be able to be agile, lean, and that we can change or move according to the business. But we need these hubs. We need these hubs absolutely to keep the experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, as I mentioned before, I think being an international business, you need to combine retail and sourcing together, and certainly from Marks and Spencer's perspective, then really the UK has to be the kind of nerve central of that. But one of the points we mentioned earlier on early on this afternoon was innovation, and the fact that so much innovation with fabric still comes from China. Then personally, if I was starting from the very beginning, I think I would still start off with Hong Kong. I think there's something to be gained from the ease of doing business here. Being able to come in here, have the meetings, have fabric suppliers from Taiwan, Korea, China, come to the meeting table, and then farm out manufacturing zones in terms of Cambodia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, places like that for manufacturing. So, I wouldn't really change, this kind of setup we've got at Marks and Spencer, even if I could start at the very beginning. What I probably would do is, it's taken M&S 10 years to go from 100% of our goods sourced from what we call full-service vendors, that's manufacturers who have London offices, do all the design, input all the goods, finance everything, and we call it off whenever we want it. It's taken 10 years to get to 50% like that, 50% direct. So probably what I would do is accelerate the direct sourcing a bit more. I do think there's a lot of value in having expertise and knowledge within your own business and not just being at the mercy of others.
Generally, toy industry has moved as a block. So if you trace how the toy industry has moved, it has moved en bloc from USA to Japan, Japan to Taiwan, and Taiwan to Hong Kong. So it has moved both development and manufacturing en bloc into these countries. It's only around the 80s that they started splitting, that the development centers remained in Hong Kong or with Hong Kong engineers, and the manufacturing went to China. Now we are at a stage where we are looking at a hybrid model where some would go straight into development centers and manufacturing centers in some countries, if possible, or have a development center in Hong Kong for the simple products and then manufacturing in some country where we have a cost advantage. So coming to your basic question, I think that does call for a little bit of centralized sourcing architecture to be done, as opposed to building it bottoms up.
Thank you. All right, it's probably a good opportunity now to maybe take some questions from the floor. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are very keen to tap into the knowledge base that's up here on the stage. So, any questions?
Peter Liu with AsiaNet Executive Search. Now, my question to the panelists is, you particularly, since Fei mentioned about the two models, one is centralized, the other one is set up hubs that are independent, may even compete with each other. Under what circumstances would be good or fit to use a particular model? Any comments from the panelists? Thank you.
I think we found a way to manage this kind of complexity by creating a global category management, which means that we have hubs, but actually they don't compete, they complete. We've got one person which is going to be located in the main hub in terms of production, manufacturing side, and vendor base, yeah? And that's where we locate our category managers for each category. Some categories are therefore based here around Hong Kong because it's our southeast. Some are based in Shanghai for power tools or tools because 100% of the vendor base is there. And some are now moving to near sourcing because that's where we're going to find the majority of the tiling and flooring, or that's the Barry center of the production worldwide. Then so it's more about collaboration. So category managers will have to work with the other sourcing offices around the world and collaborate to find the best sources. Yeah? And there are, of course, all of the mechanism of KPIs and systems behind to incentivize the collaboration and not to get confrontation from the teams. So that's one of the solutions we found.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've worked in both of those models and kind of the evolution, just sticking on Marks and Spencer, the evolution of Marks and Spencer from a sourcing perspective went through that whole process. And in the beginning, when we opened our offices, 8 offices around the world, they were very much a competition. So they were benchmarked against each other. They were bonus based on how many sales they made. By sales, I mean sales to the UK buying team. When really the only sales that's important is the sales to the customer. So we've had to go through a process of actually undoing all of that and not have a ridiculous situation where even the Shanghai office wouldn't send down the information to the Hong Kong office in case they got the business. And that for me is quite unproductive behaviour. But you almost have to go through that to sharpen up before you can get to the stage where it's important to work together.
So I personally believe at this current stage in my industry, a centralized sourcing might be a better solution. But given the history of what I've seen in other industries, electronics in particular, I always subscribe to keeping some amount of these decentralized sourcing hubs somewhere, because that promotes a little bit of entrepreneurial behavior, and sometimes knowledge and information which centrally might not be available, despite all the technologies and knowledge individual category buyers might have. So I am highly predisposed towards a central one, but not losing sight of those small centers of excellence which may exist somewhere.
I think, if I may add to that, I think that the more modern and more effective way of sourcing is the centralized approach. Simply because you bundle leverages, you create synergy, you bundle leverage possibilities at some point. Whilst in a decentralized version, as you said, they compete with each other, these offices, and they don't even share information, let alone any kind of synergy. There's no effect on this. However, when you look at brands that decide which way to set up, it's very often driven by the sourcing department within the brand. Because if you have a centralized setup, you don't need a sourcing department in a brand. You need a coordinator, maybe, but not a full-blown sourcing department. That you can dissolve and let the hub take the function. Now, many people don't like that because they're dissolving their own jobs when they design that supply chain. So they don't really go for that. So I think there's some motivation in that to be found. Once you really have a centralized setup, you can really very easily bring people on board and companies on board. But my worst nightmare is when somebody tells me, okay, I have my own office, I work with agents, and I work with factories direct. Now that's a recipe for disaster.
Other questions?
Good afternoon. My name is Alain Lejalet and I work for Damco. I have a very simple question that relates to both near and far sourcing. Is how do you plan and implement sourcing migration into low-cost countries such as Bangladesh, Cambodia, Myanmar, Ethiopia, Romania, Ukraine? What is your methodology? What is your planning? How do you do it in concrete way? Thank you for sharing.
It's interesting. Just kind of reading through the lines to your question there. Logistics and supply chain and infrastructure, warehousing, developing hubs, understanding the politics and the culture of the different countries that you manufacture in. Certainly at Marks & Spencer, they go through a fairly lengthy process on establishing all of these things at a very early stage. And the second point I would make is that going into a new market, go in with partners, people who understand your business, people who understand your ethics and environmental concerns, people who understand Marks & Spencer's quality requirements. And for us to go into a new country and just try and find a factory there and start sourcing from it tomorrow without any of those considerations, I think we'll get some trouble.
Actually, we did a modeling on going into these countries, so it took us about a year to do that modeling. Those cost was one of the key parameters, but we also looked into infrastructure, availability of labor, quality of labor, tax regimes, and there were 7 or 8 of them. I don't remember all of them. But a key thing which I wanted to share with you all also is when we talk about low-cost countries, we also need to remember the critical labor that is available in these low-cost countries. So in economics, we have something called a Lewis model, which says that a low cost will not remain a low cost for a long time. There's a tipping point that happens if your labor pool is small. So today what looks very incentivized to you, a small country like Vietnam, whose labor pool is lower than the Guangdong region of China, can very quickly turn into this tipping point where your labor cost increase can be much higher than you would imagine if you didn't do those calculations. So we take into consideration a lot of calculations, including logistics costs, because you're from Damco. So I guess different companies look at it differently, but taking the integrated approach is probably a good way to look at it.
Hello, gentlemen. Gregory Lequen from company Workwin. I can hear a lot today about purchasing, which is normal, that's the theme, but I don't hear much about end consumer. And the question is, do you feel from your own companies that the location where the product is manufactured, that they will find in UK, in France, in any Western countries, let's say, the manufacturing place is becoming something important for the end consumer that could be somehow a decision maker for the client to say whether I would buy this product, whether I would buy the next one which has the national flag on it. Thanks.
I think it does. It does specifically when your factory goes through the press as a bad place to work at, or having had a fire with death occurring like we had in Bangladesh or in Pakistan. So people do react to that, and NGOs react to it and stand in front of your stores and demonstrate that you exploit people and that you are not looking at a clean supply chain. So I think these are things that people are concerned with and companies are concerned with, and that drives sourcing decisions to an extent, because you need an infrastructure to control those elements there when you go to source somewhere. I think for the end consumer to look at a label and say, oh, this is made in Bangladesh, I don't want to buy it, I don't necessarily see this because there's still a big market out there that's very price sensitive. And with the way that world economies are going, this is not going away very soon, I think. We know from organic, this whole organic discussion, it was all wonderful. You can make an organic cotton label and create all this, but don't ask for €2 more because people don't buy it anymore. Right? We've all been down that road, and I think it's a similar thing by saying, and it's a dangerous thing to say we're only sourcing in wonderful places, and that's why you need to pay me €5 more. Nobody will do this, and you will be very open for attacks from NGOs who prove you wrong that you're not only sourcing in wonderful places. So it's dangerous to do that.
I keep trying to drive a new initiative to grow our manufacturing in Mauritius, but it's been quite difficult. It's actually the most popular sourcing destination for buyers 10 years ago.
I think we've probably got time for one or two more questions.
We're still okay. We've still got 10 minutes.
All right.
I mean, I guess I'll put in, as always, for a question. Our esteemed panel, any interesting places? I mean, we heard from Christophe in terms of the Mediterranean Rim, Eastern Europe, the sub-Indian, that Indian subcontinent. We've heard about Myanmar. I mean, are they in your plans?
I mean, if you would, I'll just comment on Myanmar particularly. I have a kind of personal interest in Myanmar. I once spent 7 years ago 2 months in part of the sabbatical, travelling around and living with monks in the forest, and quite a spiritual trip. And I must say the people there are the most wonderful people. They've had a couple of centuries of being downtrodden due to colonialism, wars, military dictatorships, and finally the door is opening, the opportunity is there, and I for one hope that they prosper as a result of all of that. From a business perspective, when you travel there, you find that there's order on the roads. It's not like Bangladesh where there's lawless on the roads, there's traffic everywhere. You can eat your dinner off the pavements. The logistics are definitely there. It's developing very quickly. There's 60 million people there. I think it probably won't go at the pace that people are anticipating. I think that infrastructure is not just about roads and lorries and all the rest of it. I mean, just being able to get, we've had a logistics team over there quite a lot in the last few weeks looking at this, and just developing capacity there, getting machinery into the country is as much of a challenge as getting garments out of the country. So I think it probably will take a bit longer than people anticipate. But I personally believe that will be up there alongside Bangladesh and Cambodia, certainly from a UK, European manufacturing perspective in the next 2 to 3 years, and possibly in the long term, even better than both of them.
And how about you, Frank? Any particular markets that excite you now?
I would say Turkey is definitely the one with the most excitement, and that's why we opened an office there after a few investigations and looking and starting from Warsaw operation, looking and going there and meeting vendors. We see they have the raw materials, they have very good manufacturing sites, very easy hubs as well in terms of transportation back to our stores in Europe. So that is a booming economy. You see the level of education is high and higher. So that's for us, it's not the new Eldorado, but it's a small China close to our markets. So it's not going to do everything that China is doing, but there are very, very good opportunities for growth for us. Yeah.
And Veit, how about you in terms of Asia, but also, I guess, Central America as well?
There's not anything new really coming up. I mean, there's geopolitical rulings that might change the landscape of sourcing a little bit. There's TPP talk in Vietnam. Whether this ever happens, God knows, and who knows, and when we all don't know. I think with the fall of quota in 2005, it raised a lot of sourcing countries like Mauritius, for example, which was purely a quota situation for sweaters. Today we do some shirts still. We make some shirts, so S12 has shirt production there, I can tell you that. But it is obviously at a premium, and very few people want to afford it and can afford it. So I think that there is no real new country. Myanmar, yes, but it's not going to be cheaper than Bangladesh. It's already more expensive. So it's not going to be that next station after Bangladesh will go.
It's just another option.
It's another option. It's nice needle, there's no doubt about it, but it is not the next Bangladesh where everybody goes. And we're already, same like Christophe, we're moving away from Bangladesh because how many eggs do you want to have in a basket that's basically a powder keg?
respond to it by taking a step back. And my response would be, I do not think there is a one-to-one replacement for China as such, so you will find a lot of multiple options coming in. And at the same time, whether we go to Bangladesh or Myanmar or any other country, the second comment I would make is there is no instant formula. It takes time to develop an ecosystem. So whichever you select for your product group or your company, my recommendation would be please have a look that it is relevant not just for today's sourcing, but would be relevant 5-7 years from now. That sometimes we miss. Because if you go by today's sourcing, and let's assume cost to be an important parameter, which will be for purchasing people the most important parameters, though you add on certain aspects to it, but cost will continue to remain the most important. If you take that only as the basis, many people would have moved out of China long time back. China's labor cost is $3 an hour. Bangladesh is $0.4 an hour. India is $1 an hour. So, but people have not moved en bloc. That's because it takes time to move. It should be relevant 4-5 years from now. And I really haven't studied Burma to be able to give you a feedback on that.
Interesting about the labour cost, though, because I think from January this year, I mean, there's a number of countries in Southeast Asia and that Indian subcontinent that they've all kind of hiked up their minimum wages.
Yes. So, three things go hand in hand in labour cost when you make these studies. One is the labour cost itself. The second is the inflation of those countries. And the third is the currency rate, exchange rate. So, we need to factor all three into consideration. For example, if you look at Vietnam, for example, the inflation rate in Vietnam is very high, but the deflation of the Vietnam currency is also very high. So it offsets 100% nearly. So these three have to be taken into consideration. If you take that into consideration, even today, China is multiple times more expensive than many countries, but that only doesn't drive a sourcing decision.
So cost is not the...
Okay, as a purchaser, I must say it's the most important thing, but it's not the only thing.
I have to throw one more into that and say that the free trade agreements is a very key one as well. And I would say, from M&S perspective, it would be a game changer, for example, if India or Indonesia suddenly got duty free into Europe.
Okay.
I think that would make a massive difference.
Good point. Gary Newman, question for you, from you, sir. Yep, should be up.
Okay, so it seems, as you've just been explained, that a large reason for your sourcing strategy is centered around cost, with an eye about supply chain sustainability and manufacturing competence of your partners. But what in addition to that, when you look at value proposition, are there other value propositions that are very serious for you? And what are you looking for other than cost in your partners?
I think one very important component besides cost is the development capabilities of a market. And I mean, you've mentioned it, I mean, for toys, for garments, the same way. You don't go to Bangladesh for the fashion creative output of that country. So what we have as part of our strategy for some of our brands, we have developed so-called development centers. So where we do all the development, we do all the design development in those centers. And once the item is ready, finished to go, we just take it and we plug it onto a vendor in Tanzania, in Lesotho, and what price basically drives us to get the best deal for this product. But in order to be able to do this, you need to decouple your development from your production. If you keep that together, you're very much bound to work in China because that's where your development is. You're very much bound to work in India because that's where another creative source is. But besides that, Vietnam, Cambodia, there's not much, I mean, there's always an exception to the rule, don't get me wrong, but there's not much creative force coming up in there. So I think development is one of the bigger drivers besides the price. And can actually overrule pricing sometimes.
Actually, I fully agree with you. And there's one aspect which we don't discuss. All of us have discussed many aspects. The other aspect which we look into at least is the markets that we will grow in as a customer base, where we will sell. So obviously, if you're going to grow in China, you're not going to remove your old supply base out of China, because it would be rather foolish to get it imported into China. So, except for very large runners, yeah, I agree with you. But in general, that doesn't happen. So, if you have a plan for a very big growing market base, India, for example, Indonesia, for example, you could also factor that into your calculation for a sourcing option.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, isn't it? You know, in China, for China, right? I mean, that's kind of one of those key drivers these days. Peter, you invariably deal with a lot of multinationals. What are they telling you? Because, you know, they do call you up.
The biggest challenge right now is, as I mentioned right up front, just setting the scene, is times have changed. So they really are assessing their current sourcing procurement model, how it supports their regional strategy, how it supports their global strategy. And as the panelists have mentioned, it's not about price, it's about responsiveness, agile supply chain. There's a whole lot of factors that are involved. So right now the hot topic is how do we set ourselves up for the next 5 to 10 years?
Right.
What's the right model?
Right. And gents, just to kind of finish up on a little bit of crystal ball gazing. We heard from Christoph when he said today, you know, or yesterday, a couple of years ago, China represented 80% of the business. Today, 60%. Who knows, in a couple of years' time, maybe 40, 35, 30, 40%. Amit, how about with Hasbro? Because you're the toy industry.
I think still 70% of the business in the next 3-4 years will be China.
So, moving forward, next 3 or 4 years, 70%. Fight?
We've moved from China plus one to a model of 8 or 10 plus China. So we're already on the way out, much further down the road.
Right.
Being apparel.
I think on the apparel side.
So maybe China fabrics about 50% going forward, and trims, the secondary industry, and maybe garment production on the technical side, footwear 25%.
Okay. Frank?
I said in the introduction we are 80-20. We think we'll go to 70-30, 60-40. I think just to highlight the main challenge for Chinese manufacture is how they're going to invest and get into automation, because that's the key. To mitigate FX rates change for us or labor cost increase, that's going to be the key. So in terms of factor for the vendors we're going to look at over the next few years, I think there's going to be a dramatic change in the landscape of the vendor base in China. And we'll see some industry able to invest, some not, so they're going to move out. Some factories able to invest, some not, and they're going to disappear. So I see and I can forecast a consolidation of the vendors in some industries in China.
Right. Richard?
I see certainly China losing a couple of points in terms of its percentage share of the market from a needlepoint perspective, but I really do in the next 5 years plus see it remaining our most important country in terms of raw material developments, which we will then manufacture in a number of different places. And I certainly don't see us adding too many other countries to the mix. I think we've pretty much got a lot of our plate living in what we've already got.
Yeah. Okay. Final comment from you, Mr. Liddell?
Final comment. I think some really good insights, and clearly it's interesting that it is an industry by industry, product group by product group. There's not one size fits all. And as the panelists have said, there's a lot of considerations, and it's certainly something you need to work through. So I think it's something you need to take time, you need to address, you need to consider, calculate, and make sure you get the right strategy for a longer term, not just a short fix. So again, thanks to our panelists for the insights. It's been very, very insightful, and please join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your insights.